Happy to have you join us today on the episode of the Well Off podcast. The guest today is Ken Bekendam. And Ken is an interesting person. He is very well known for his legal second suite conversions. They specialize in buying these bungalows that have pretty large basements and legally transforming them into rentable units. A lot of people don't know that you have to go through a pretty tedious process in order to legally be allowed to rent out your basement. Some people think that if you just have like a separate entrance and you meet some of the criteria that it works, but it's truly not the case. So a lot of good stuff in here for you if you are ever thinking about potentially putting a legal suite in your own home or in an investment property. Check it out. Always appreciate your feedback, so you can leave a review, let me know what you think. And also, if you happen to know someone who's looking to invest, reach out to me, let me know. I would love to help your friends, family, coworkers, anyone who's in the market right now to buy an investment property. Look for me on welloff.ca, or you can send me an email, george@welloff.ca. Feel free to also send me a text. All my information is on the website. Thank you. Enjoy the episode.
Welcome to the Well Off podcast, where the goal is to motivate, inspire, and share success principles. I'm here with Ken Bekendam, and for the first time, I actually asked how to pronounce the last name before we got started. So welcome to the show, Ken.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's
Great.
awesome to be here.
Yeah, so for those that don't know, Ken is an active real estate investor. He is the owner and founder of King Homes. And from my understanding, you specialize in creating legal second suites. It's also a renovation and construction company. You are also a husband, a father, a contractor, and an alpaca farmer.
Yeah, yep.
That's really interesting. When I read that you were an alpaca farmer, I thought that was interesting. I didn't even know what they were. So I Googled it, and it turns out that they're kind of from the llama family in certain ways.
Yeah, so basically they're a smaller version of a llama.
Mm-hmm.
They're part of the camel family. So the camels, llamas, and alpacas are part of the same type of family of animal. And so yeah, they're great farm animals. They're very simple to care for. They're fluffy and very calm, and yeah, they're
Awesome.
great.
And so you live on a 10-acre farm?
Yeah, so back in 2016, my wife and I bought our quote unquote forever home, which was a 10-acre hobby farm, and ever since we got it, we've been slowly getting more and more animals through Facebook.
Really?
Yeah.
Like what? Facebook Marketplace?
Yeah. No. Well, there's quite a few different Facebook groups for livestock that you can buy and trade and sell livestock. So when I'm not browsing my news feed, I'm, looking at the livestock group, seeing what's available out there, and some stuff's free.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are just looking to rehome their animals. So we've gotten quite a few from there. Some we've paid for, but it's not really that expensive to get.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. So you've got, not only do you have the alpaca, you also said you have some horses?
Yeah, so we have one horse,
Mm-hmm.
and we have 2 miniature ponies. And we have, what else? We got, I think 9 goats, 7 pigs, a sheep, a rooster, 2 peacocks.
Cool.
We have 11 alpacas. Yeah.
Cool. Where did the alpacas come from? Where are they originally from?
Good question. I think they're from South America.
Yeah, you're probably right. I did see that today in my research.
Yeah, that's where they originate from, and then obviously they were brought up here at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cool. So that's pretty awesome. I've always thought, not always, but as of late, I've thought about how cool it would be to have a farm and to have all sorts of animals. And I'm thinking that for you, it's just you just take care of these animals and they kind of become your friends in some way. Is that accurate, or do you have them for a purpose?
No, it's always been our dream to, live out in the country on a hobby farm, have some animals, just to have on the property to care for. I find it very relaxing. Mm-hmm. It is a lot of work. There's morning and evening chores to, to like in the morning I wake up, I go out there, I let them out, I put hay in the feeders, I spread some grain, I let them out. In the evening, I take them in, I shovel poop, I feed them more hay, more grain, more water. I find it, it's my 10, 15 minutes, sometimes half an hour of kind of peace and relaxation after a long, busy day. And it's not easy. It's not, it is work, shoveling a lot of manure. But I can be out there kind of by myself with my own thoughts in my own head and kind of just be able to kind of relax a little bit. Yeah.
And do you think that you've developed some sort of relationship with these animals? Do you think that they kind of recognize you as someone who cares for them?
Oh, for sure. Like when as soon as I start walking towards the barn, they all get excited and because they know it's feeding time. Whenever we're even outside, the horses and the ponies and the goats will all come up to the fence, wanting to be petted. And, at first, when we first get the animals, sometimes they're very skittish and standoffish. But when they see you come in and every day, twice a day, they get used to you. And I know one of the baby alpacas actually every morning when I go in there to spread the grain will come up to me and basically rub noses with me.
Really?
And alpacas are very standoffish animals. In the wild, not that they're in the wild much anymore, but they do live in a herd, but they're not very affectionate with one another. They like their own little space. So it's actually amazing that, this alpaca actually will come up to us. And we can actually pet it and stuff like that. So
awesome. How are they with strangers? Like if you have a friend over or something, will they approach that person or will they stay away?
The baby will. Yeah, the baby alpaca will. The others, you just have to go slow. You can't rush them. You can try and get a pet in, but you just have to be very slow about it. Because again, they're very, their nature is to kind of not to have a lot of affection. So you don't have an alpaca to ride and cuddle and hug and,
right.
It's not like a horse. Like a horse, they love affection. They love to be brushed. You can ride them. Alpacas, they're just nice farm animals. We do shear them every spring. People make stuff out of the wool, like socks and hats and scarves and insoles and all sorts of stuff. Yeah.
How do you round out the troops at the end of the day?
They just come in. As soon as you are in the barn spreading feed and hay, they just all rush into the barn.
Oh, cool. And they're all living together, mixed in with each other?
Well, so during the daytime, they're out in the paddock all together. We do separate the male and female alpacas because they get into each other. But at nighttime, we do separate them all into their own individual spaces, so that because we do feed them separately at nighttime, different types of grain and making sure that everybody gets the appropriate amount of food.
Cool.
So they stay nice and healthy.
That's awesome. Good for you.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into some of the other stuff. I love talking about this. I think that's awesome. But I'd like to first start off by asking you about your childhood, what that was like, and just certain memories you have of being younger.
Yeah, so I grew up in a real estate family. My dad was buying properties since he was in his early 20s. So even before I was born, there's been a rental property in the family. And so I have memories as a kid, going into some of these properties, between tenants or what have you, cleaning carpets, stripping wallpaper. Back in the day, there was a lot of carpet around. So we're always lugging the steam cleaner around in between. I remember my grandma stripping wallpaper, but then re-wallpapering the walls. Wow. Because, we were still doing that, right? Now we're painting a lot. But, and just knocking on doors, trying to get the rent and following up with the tenants to try and get paid on time. So that's just kind of part of my childhood growing up. And so, I realized that, not everybody grows up in a family that has real estate, especially from a young age. But, growing up, you don't really appreciate or realize what your parents are doing when they have property. And so it still didn't become real for me until I started buying my own property, in my own name. That cash flow was going into my own pocket. And then, it became life-changing for me. Yeah.
Where did you grow up, by the way?
So I grew up in Brantford.
Okay.
Yeah, born and raised. And a lot of my family is still there in the area. So all of my siblings, we all live 10, 15 minutes apart.
Cool.
So yeah, that's in itself is a kind of unique situation, that having family live close by. I spent 4 years in the States for school, and a lot of my friends down there, like in the States, it's much more common for families to be spread out across all the states, right?
Yeah.
You have 4 kids and one of them lives in a different state, right? And so I realized that was kind of unique and special in itself, just to have your family still live close by. So we do have a very kind of tight family.
Yeah, just looking at your Facebook profile, it says that you've studied design at Niagara College, business communication at Calvin College. Where is Calvin College?
So Calvin is in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Oh, okay. So that's where you were saying that you went off to college.
Yeah, so I spent 4 years down in Grand Rapids, studied business. I actually went there first to study music. So I play guitar and piano and sing and a bunch of stuff. And so I first went down there to actually get a music degree. Quickly realized that, there's really no future in having a music degree. And so I started, taking business courses as well when I was down there. Yeah.
How have the business courses helped you, if in any way at all?
No, actually, looking back at it, it was very helpful having business, studying business in school. At the time, you're just going to college for fun.
Yeah, well, for fun, yeah.
For quote unquote fun, right?
Yeah.
Not really being too serious about your studies. But I studied business communication, so there's a lot of marketing, advertising, just general business communication rather than business admin or accounting, finance, stuff like that.
Yeah, I went to the University of Toronto, and I finished with a specialist in international relations, major in economics, minor in French, and I don't think that was of any use at all for me. The only thing that was useful to me was that university taught me how to think. And prior to university, I just got by school. It was very easy. But when I was studying, I realized that in order for me to succeed, I had to really think about what I'm studying in a different manner. And that's something that's carried over with me throughout. And just to be a little bit more clear on that, it takes a certain level of focus in order to have clear thoughts. And that was something that I can say that one of the only things that I really learned from university.
Yeah, I have no regrets about going to school, spending that time, spending that money. Because, even in the States, I went to a private liberal college down in the States, and, there's a bit of a price tag to do that.
Yeah.
I look up here, and some of my peers are complaining about tuition fees to go to university. And, yes, it's expensive, but, by gosh, look down at the States and what people are paying, right? But the life skills and the life experience that you gain going to school, you can't put a price on that, and even my own kid, I would encourage him to go to university, and I'd be more than happy to pay for it.
Yeah.
Regardless of what you learn, it's the life experience, right? And, I still have some very close friends from college that I'm still close with, and, so, these days, there's a lot of talk about, we don't need school and all this kind of stuff. And I would agree with that, being into real estate investing. But there's certain things that, you learn when you're, leave home, go away from home, start to live on your own. I think it's important for everybody to experience that.
Yeah, I would agree with you. What do you... At this point right now, if we're getting into the present, what is it that you are doing? What are you most focused on right now in your business?
Yeah, so my business is King Homes Inc., which was basically developed to be the renovation part of our business of real estate investing. It was just this past year or two that we started actually doing work for other people, other clients. Up till now, we just been kind of focusing on our own business, our own real estate properties, renovating them ourselves, doing our own permits. I come from a design background, so I can do my own CAD work and whatnot. But realizing that there's a growing interest and demand in legalizing, doing secondary units, and so it just kind of naturally grew into starting to do a lot more work for other people. And again, it's just all kind of word of mouth and referrals right now. Like I don't do any major advertising or marketing, just the pure demand for secondary units, and so that's primarily what I'm working on right now, and we're renovating some of our own houses right now. Currently, we got a bunch on the go for some other clients, and it's been great, and I've learned a ton too the last 2 years, especially about legalizing and because since the province came out with Bill 140 allowing more secondary units, there's a lot more interest and demand for legalizing. In the province and the cities are making it much easier. So like before, like we were doing second units for, I remember doing them like 10 years ago, but we would never do them legally, right? Because you just couldn't. We'd still build to the building code and still do things properly and safe. But we would never actually pull a permit for it. Now we're pulling permits pretty much, 95% of the time. There's a couple occasions where we won't for whatever reason, but most things we're pulling permits now just because it's easy, and it's not as hard as people think it is to actually pull a permit and to follow the building code when you're renovating. The reason I find that a lot of people don't is lack of knowledge around the building code, lack of knowledge around zoning bylaws, right? So people just kind of get scared of that whole process, and then they just avoid the whole permit process and not realizing that they're actually doing themselves a detriment because there's so many benefits now to legalizing versus not legalizing. And still the number one reason we legalize is because as an investor, we want that rental unit to count as legal income, because if it's not a legally permitted renovation, the appraiser can't take into account that income from that unit. Right. So it actually hurts you when you go to refinance that property. And a lot of investors miss this. They don't realize why we legalize. They think it's, obviously to make it legal with the city and to do things properly, which is important. But the bigger importance is the legal income factor, right? And qualifying for mortgages and stuff is increasingly difficult, right? So we need as much legal income behind our name in order to continue to grow our portfolios.
Do you find that today appraisers are starting to understand the added value of a legal unit, whereas perhaps in the past they would compare your legal unit to an illegal secondary suite that was close by in the area and that kind of looked the same and whatnot?
Not really. They're slowly coming around, but it's still based on market fundamentals, market demand, comps, what's recently sold that's fully renovated. Again, like tenants don't really care either way if it's actually legal or not. They're looking at the finished product, so the quality of the renovation. We are seeing more tenants, more discerning tenants who are coming maybe from a poor quality rental unit and now desire something that is legal and done correctly. Like I'm slowly seeing that. I wouldn't say it's a big driver. But appraisers, they're just appraising on comps, right? So, they see another fully renovated house with an in-law suite, and it's not legal, and they see your place that's actually legalized. They're not really, they might put a couple points on the valuation, but I wouldn't say it's going to be an extra 20, 30 grand
Right.
bump up on the price. But the biggest thing is that they can account for that full rental income as a legal income, right? So legal income for a duplex versus legal income for a single family home.
Are you talking about 100% of the income? Because I know certain banks, for example, they'll take 50% of the rental income or 80% or whatever.
Well, it's still based on each individual lender still having their own criteria, whether
Yeah.
they accept 50%, 80%, or 100%, right? But what the appraiser is putting on his report is the actual rental income for the property.
Okay, so
for
you're
both
saying
units.
you're saying that if it's recognized as a in-law suite, non-legal, then they will not take into account that income at all.
No.
Yeah.
No.
So you're earning $1,500 a month from the basement, but it's an illegal suite, so the appraiser will just dismiss that completely.
Yeah, because the city could come in and shut down that unit, and all of a sudden that income is gone.
Right.
Right. So, like, let's say a typical duplex that we're getting, $3,200, $3,400, $3,500 gross rent, right? That's legal income for that property versus that same property as a single family. The appraiser might only put $2,500 or something.
Yeah.
As legal income for a single family home in that market.
That's right. Okay. Have you ever had a situation where you had an illegal suite or one of your clients did, and did you ever see somebody get shut down for that?
Yes, I've seen it before with one of our properties where it was an illegal unit, and the appraiser basically put on his report, $2,500 for the rent, and I'm trying to tell the banker, I'm like, look, there's like $3,400 here a month coming in, like why? What's going on? And like, well, we can only take the legal use of the property and the legal rent, so it did affect my qualifying on that property. Since I'm in the legal conversion business, like I do help a lot of clients who have gotten letters from the city, complaining about illegal duplexes, threatening to shut them down. So, I've had people who had to take, a 3-unit and bring it back down to a 2-unit, and so now I think there's ways around it that you can still, rent out those 3 units, but you have to present it to the city as a 2-unit, right? So the appraiser will only put 2 units of rent on the report, not 3. So it does hurt you when you don't legalize it on the qualifying side, and unless you've kind of gone through that process, you don't actually realize how it hurts you until it's too late.
Right. Well, at that point, then you're looking at big costs to conform it to legal status potentially, or if you get shut down. Like, have you ever heard of anyone that doesn't comply with the city, and then the city sends somebody to basically like rip out a kitchen or something like that?
I've never seen it where they've had to rip out an entire kitchen. Like basically, I've seen it where people have had to remove the stove, because the stove is a secondary cooking facility, which is needed to make a dwelling unit complete. Is you need a place to cook, right? So to bring it back into conformity, they had to remove the stove.
Oh, okay.
So that when the inspector comes in and looks, it's like, okay, well, there's no secondary cooking facility. This is now back to a single family home.
But if it's rented, how does that play into the factor? You have a family living there, but there's no stove.
Well, so like these are things that you do in order when the inspector comes to inspect, to kind of get around it. Right? People like the inspectors aren't stupid. Like they know what's going on. The cities know what's going on, but they're so process oriented and they follow these checklists. Like when they come out at the time of inspection, this unit didn't have a secondary cooking facility, therefore, it's not a duplex, right? So, there's ways of getting around it. Not that it's all right or legal, but like these are things that investors that I've heard of doing, to kind of get around an illegal duplex complaint.
Yeah. Okay. You are obviously doing these conversions in Brantford. I've seen some of your projects. You do them in Hamilton. Do you do them anywhere else?
As far as the personal ones that I'm doing, we're basically just doing them in Brantford and Hamilton.
Okay.
I try and stick fairly close to home for these projects. I do permit work elsewhere. Like I was up in Barrie not too long ago doing a permit up there. Toronto, Etobicoke, Vaughan, Brampton, London. So I'll travel to do some permit work, but I do live out in Brantford, and so just for my guys and just for day-to-day management, I try not go more than 45 minutes from my house.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, can you kind of walk us through some of the essential things that somebody needs to look out for if they're trying to purchase a property and then convert the basement, let's say first in Brantford and then maybe second in Hamilton?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say, like, there are city-specific zoning bylaws that everybody needs to be aware of, but in general, when you're going to go look at a property, first we are checking the zoning. So even before you go to visit the property for a viewing, if you're just looking it up on realtor.ca or if somebody sends you the listing, first you have to determine the zone that it's in and whether or not it will permit a legal duplex or a secondary unit or accessory dwelling or converted dwelling or whatever other permitted uses are for that zone. Because if it's not a permitted use, then you have to go for a zoning amendment or which is much more difficult, more time, more cost. Has to go in front of council and all this kind of stuff. So, and for one unit, it doesn't make sense to go for a zoning change.
Right.
If we're going for 2, 3, 4 units, then, you can make a financial case to take the time and expense to go through that zoning change. So if we're good with the zoning and it's part of the permitted use, then, the next thing I'm looking for is parking, and these are things I'm doing from home, not at the property yet. Mm-hmm. So I can determine parking with, pretty close accuracy from the GIS maps, which every city has on their website. So you go to the city's zoning page and you can find the GIS maps. You can look up the zoning for the property, but they also have the aerial photography and what they call base maps. Mm-hmm. And then they also have their measuring tool. And so between the base maps and measuring tool, you can kind of measure up the area that you need for parking. While at the same time looking at the parking bylaw that the city has. And every city has different requirements for parking. Mm. In most cases, it's one parking spot per unit, but each city has their own dimensions for parking. Yeah. So each parking stall is a different dimension with different dimensions for maneuvering space, whether on or off the property. So if we're good with zoning and we can fit, legal parking within the legal lot lines of the property without a minor variance, then we'll book a time to go to the property. Mm-hmm. And then, this is where we have to check for basically building code compliance and whether or not we can meet building code with the space. Because if we can't meet building code, then we can't get a permit. Mm-hmm. If you can't get a permit, you can't legalize, right? So once we go to visit the property, the very first thing I do is when I'm outside, I measure up, for parking, make sure that what I measured up online, fits with what I'm measuring up on site to make sure we can fit our legal parking. And then the next thing I do is I go down into the basement. Most times we're converting the basement, so I need to go downstairs and determine what our finished ceiling heights are going to be. So I'm measuring so I'll find a spot in the basement that's hopefully unfinished, whether it's by the furnace or something. I measure from the concrete floor to the underside of the ceiling joist and make sure I'm meeting our minimum ceiling heights, which in Ontario here is 6 foot 8 inches, okay. Clear finished height from your floor finishing to the underside of your drywall, 6 foot 8 inches, which is 80 inches. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then I'm also going to, the next thing I check is I measure underneath the beam. So I find the beam in the basement, I measure from concrete floor to the underside of the beam because we need minimum 6 foot 5 inches underneath the beam. And these are two things that are very difficult to change. The ceiling joist, so your main height underneath the ceiling joist is very difficult to change without jacking up the house or digging out the concrete and lowering the floor, right? So these are two things that we must have, right? The beam height, if we're too low on the beam, let's say we're 6 foot 2, 6 foot 3, 6 foot 4, and we can't meet our minimum clear height underneath a beam, then we have to replace that beam, right? Now, we don't always have to replace the entire beam. Sometimes we're just replacing sections of the beam where we're walking through paths of egress and passageways. So I would say every other basement that we're doing, we're replacing a section of beam. Like we're cutting out the beam and putting in a flush beam, a flush LVL beam, whether 2-ply, 3-ply, 4-ply, so that we can create clear heights, especially at the bottom of stairs. When we're doing open concept living room kitchens, those beams there oftentimes are being replaced with flush beams. So those are the two things. Everything else is, just meeting the building code. So window sizes for natural light, minimum room sizes. And these are all things that through the floor plans and through renovations, we can meet. But if we're in the right zone, we have the parking, we have our ceiling heights, or we can replace a beam in order to create the ceiling height, then we're pretty good. Like we're good on everything else.
Okay, when you talk about replacing a beam, you said a flush beam. Is that still a wooden beam that you're using, and it's maybe not as thick as the previous beam?
Yeah. So, I'll just speak to a previous project that we're on right now. So, it's an older house, an older bungalow, 1950s, 1970s, somewhere in that era. So there's big wood beams in the basement. This one here was a 5-ply, 1 3/4 by 9.5 inch wood beam, right? Running down the center of the house. 6 foot 3 inches underneath the beam. So it's too low to meet our minimum ceiling height, right? So I know that section has to be replaced, right? So then, with consulting with an engineer, we determined that, okay, a 4-ply, 1.75, so 1 3/4 by a 7.5 inch LVL bolted together will carry that span, that load, so you do have to consult with an engineer to make sure that structurally that it's sound. And some cases, like the existing columns that are supporting that beam, sometimes they're fine to be left where they are. Sometimes, if we're trying to make it really open concept, some of these structural columns have to be moved or a new one has to be done. So you're creating new point loads in the basement. So this is where we have to cut out the concrete, pour a new pad footing underneath that post that supports that beam. Mm-hmm. So, you're getting into some structural work, but it's not as difficult as people think it is. Like people get really scared about touching structural things, which, you should, right? You don't want to mess with the house. But, consulting with a designer, an engineer, architect, you can usually figure out what you need. Mm. And this is where some people just will walk away from the house because they think, okay, well, we can't meet our minimum ceiling height underneath the beam, right? I'm like, guys, look, this is like a $2,000-$3,000 job, to replace this beam. It's like shouldn't deter you from buying the house. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Some of these beams are steel I-beams. Like once you get into some newer houses, like 1980s plus, you're going to start seeing more and more steel I-beams. They can still be replaced. They're much more difficult to replace because you have to cut the metal and weld, and they're heavy as all get out. Most times when we're seeing on the newer houses, once we get into some steel I-beams, that the clear height is there.
Yeah.
So it's not too. I can't recall one recently that we've actually had to replace a steel I-beam.
Why wouldn't you replace the wooden beam with a steel one?
Just due to complexity of installation, right? A steel I-beam is much more heavier to do. Now you can span a longer distance, but a good engineer will be able to spec something out of LVLs, which is still like wooden timbers that can be installed ply by ply. So for your carpenters or for yourself installing, it's much easier to do. You're not killing your back. Like I've done a steel I-beam before, and we've had to have like 12 guys in the basement in order to lift the I-beam up into place. So it's very labor intensive, and you have to pull a whole bunch of people together for that hour or two to lift that I-beam in place. Whereas working with LVLs is much easier. And you can still drill through an LVL for electrical line or a plumbing pipe or something. So like your electrician and plumbers still can work with it, can work around it or work through it. Where a steel I-beam, you can't.
But if you were to build a home from scratch today, then would the building code require steel, or it's either one?
It's either one. It depends on the spans and the load that it's carrying.
Okay.
You're seeing a lot of steel I-beams in new construction for sure, but it's much easier because they can crane the I-beam in place, right? And you can span longer distances, so you don't need as many posts in the basement.
Mm-hmm. What kind of costs can you expect if you were to replace some of those posts that you discussed to support the beams?
So like for instance, I'm just going to speak to like a secondary suite in the basement, right? So, lots of times we're replacing, at least 2 columns and a beam, right? If we're going to be opening up the space, opening up the span for an open concept kitchen and living room.
Yeah.
So like the beam itself, like the material is only like, $500 in material for the LVLs. Same thing with the posts. So like the pad footings, $1,000, $1,200, you can get, 2 4x4 new concrete pad footings installed. Plus the material, and then the labor, like usually, you have the jackhammer out the concrete, pour new concrete. So, a bunch of time spent on that, reinforcing it with rebar. So if we're going to replace a beam and new support columns on new concrete pad footings, like, maybe $3,000 to $5,000, somewhere in that range. Like it's not terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it could be a lot worse.
Yeah, it could be a lot worse. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. What about jacking up a house or underpinning? Have you ever done stuff like that?
I haven't been involved personally on my own projects, jacking up a house. But I do know some other clients that I've worked with that have.
Yeah.
And you just have to make a financial case for it, right? So depending on what you buy the house for, if you get it substantially under market value, like it's a wholesale deal or something, you can afford to put, an extra $20,000 into jacking up the house, putting a couple more rows of block or something on the foundation and putting it back down again. But you have to be planning a pretty substantial renovation to the house, like because all the wiring has to get disconnected from the panel and reconnected. So you're more than likely rewiring the house anyways. You're more than likely replumbing the house anyways. And so you just have to make it's a financial decision, right? If it's a good house, but the basement is like 5 feet, and but you got the thing at a steal of a deal. And it makes sense to put in $20,000 to jack up the house to get a full legal apartment in there. It's better than buying another house.
Yeah,
so it just depends what you buy it for.
Yeah, this is just a random question that I've thought about, never really looked into. But how is the foundation connected to the brick? How is it all held together?
Well, most foundations, you have your foundation. And then on the top of your foundation, before the floor joists go in, they have basically like a sill plate. So it could be 2x4, 2x6. That's laid flat along the top of the foundation. That gets bolted into the foundation, so it's held firmly in place. And then all your floor joists rest on top of that, 16-inch center or 24-inch center. And then, your plywood subfloor goes down on top of that. So when it's a brick veneer on the house, like that foundation is keyed out, 4 inches, right?
Right, but what if it's an older home and it's all brick?
Well, you have to this is where a lot of times when we're jacking up a house, like sometimes the brick veneer has to come off, like because you have to disconnect it, right? The brick is supported from the bottom up, right? So you're going to raise up the house 2 feet, you have to basically disconnect the bottom courses of brick from the foundation. You're compromising all of your entire brick veneer. So oftentimes we're not doing them on brick veneer houses, like unless you're planning on stripping the brick and re-veneering the house, right? A lot of the houses that people are jacking up for this type of thing is houses that are sided, right?
Yeah. Well, when you say brick veneer, doesn't that just mean that there is a wooden frame and then that's the support of that gives the home its structural integrity, and the brick is just for cosmetic purposes?
Yeah, the brick, like when you see a brick house, the brick is just a veneer on the outside of the wood frame.
Okay.
Like the brick doesn't give any structural integrity.
Even in the older homes? Like I own a home that was built in 1912 and it's got double layer brick.
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
So the older homes that are all like double brick,
Yeah.
some I've seen them where they're all like cinder block.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are structural. That's structural to the house.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like that's holding up the house.
Yeah. So
Right.
how, just out of curiosity, I know we're kind of off topic, but do you know how those homes, how the foundation is connected to the brick? Is it kind of the same thing? The 2x4 is bolt and then the brick sits on top?
Well, so in that case, the foundation would be the stone foundations are much thicker, and so they're keyed out much further, so they can carry double brick
Okay.
on the outside. And then usually on the inside with these double bricked houses, it's like strapping on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
So like a lot of these double brick homes don't have very much insulation in them because it's double brick, strapping, and then like lath and plaster, right? So there's like maybe an inch there
Yeah.
for insulation. So these older homes don't have insulation behind those plaster walls.
But do they need it? Or is it naturally insulated with the brick and the plaster?
Well, the double brick does give more insulation factor. It doesn't nearly meet the code requirement now for insulation, but there's thousands and thousands, millions of homes out there that are these older double brick houses.
Yeah.
Like I have a couple houses in my portfolio that are these older double brick
Yeah.
homes. But when people are doing these pretty substantial renovations to these older century homes, they are stripping off all the lath and plaster. They're stripping off the strapping, and they're restudding from the inside out. Like they're restudding those walls, spray foam insulation, the whole bit. But yeah, it's getting into some pretty substantial renovation work, right? So again, it goes back to if you can justify it financially, right? If you get this house, like in the market, the house is maybe worth, $500,000, and you bought the thing for $200,000. You can afford to put $50,000 into stripping the house and jacking it up, and to put a legal suite in. It goes back to what the house were reappraised for, right? The comps that you can get. So you don't see it too often. I wouldn't say everybody's out there jacking up houses and stripping them, but you do see it once in a while.
Is there anything that you would look at in a home and say, okay, because of this, I'm not willing to move forward because the cost will just be ridiculous to repair?
Yeah, all the time. Like have that conversation weekly with investors who bring a property to me and say, hey, Ken, what are your thoughts on this? We want to legalize. We want to put a second suite in. It's an older, dated house, right? It needs a lot of, both cosmetic work, but also like, pretty major infrastructure work, like electrical and plumbing and HVAC. And I tell them, like, look, what's another similar house in the area that's fully renovated? Like, what's it selling for? You have to justify the renovations with what you can get. If your plan is to refinance and try and pull out as much money as you can, right? There's a lot of times when, we have to renovate the house regardless. Like it needs updating. The electrical has to be redone, and sometimes it costs you more than what the market will justify on a refinance. So depending on, if your strategy is long-term buy and hold, just be prepared to have more money tied up in the property that you can't pull out, and it'll take more time for the market to catch up with what you put into the house. Yeah. Right. I'm just helping an investor right now. We working on a duplex to a triplex conversion. So we did 2 units already, but the cost to do the basement is actually quite substantial because we have to do interior waterproofing. We have to re-pour the concrete floor. Like it's an older century home. We have to install a bigger driveway, big concrete walkout for this particular house. So it was like, $130,000 to do this basement conversion or the basement of this triplex. And at the time, he can't recoup that money out of the property. The money he spends on it will just be stuck in the property. So we're actually sitting on that for now. We're not going to do the third unit just because of the costs. and he's looking at another property, like another bungalow, to convert and put the money into that property instead.
Yeah. At some point, it makes more sense for you to take that capital that you were going to invest to create a legal suite and just buy another house with it.
Yeah. So it just depends on, again, it goes back to comps and refis and what you can pull out and how much you're willing to have sit in the property. And sometimes there's better places to put that equity that you can get back, and that will actually produce you a better return.
Why did you tell this person that they had to re-pour the concrete on the floor?
So in this house, it was an older century home. It was like 1900s. The existing concrete floor was quite wavy. And part of the project included interior waterproofing. So we already had to jackhammer up the perimeter of the foundation on the inside to install the interior waterproofing system. And then because of the basement suite itself, like the new bathrooms and kitchens, we had to jackhammer up another good chunk of the floor just to install the plumbing work and the infrastructure. And then with the new concrete walkout that was being installed as well, the drain for that concrete walkout had to tie back into the sump well. So again, another chunk is being jackhammered out just to tie in the drain for the walkout. So all things considered, 3/4 of the floor is already being jackhammered up. In consultation with a lot of concrete guys, we all determined that, there's no point in just repouring on top of the existing floor. One is super wavy, and there's no way that, you can guarantee that this floor is not going to continue to move or to fracture and stuff like that. So, for an extra day of labor, basically to jack out the entire floor and get rid of it, is really only like a $1,500 difference, right? Because if you have to re-pour anyways another 3 or 4 inch slab across the entire basement, what's an extra $1,500 to just remove all the old concrete and start fresh?
Wow, that would be an interesting thing to see. They would probably have to go through a window, I guess, and just throw down all the concrete and work from there.
Yeah, in this particular project, like order of operations, was to first get the concrete walkout done and poured. So that was become our main access point into the basement for the duration of the renovation. And so, there's a logical process that things have to be done. This particular basement did have an older concrete walkout, but it didn't meet the height requirement. It was in a crawl space, and we just couldn't utilize it. So we had to make a new one. Yeah.
Cool. Very quickly, I just wanted to come back to that property that I mentioned to you, the one that I have built in 1912. It was used as a duplex at one point, except the way that it was set up is as you enter through the main entrance, there were 2 doors on the inside that take you to the 2 separate units. It's a 2.5-story home, so the attic is a finished space. And upstairs, through door number 1, you had a kitchen and a couple bedrooms. And on the main floor, you had another kitchen and then a bedroom. And there was a bathroom downstairs, but the ceiling is really low. So I decided to just, for the most, to not spend too much, just to convert it to a single family. But have you seen projects like that where it is legal to have a duplex where the entrances are from the inside?
Yeah, no, like a lot of times we're having a common entrance to the dwelling units. So we're coming in one front door, and then we're separating into 2 separate units.
Okay.
So that common area, that shared exit is what we call it in the building code language. There's certain requirements that shared exit has to meet.
Okay.
Right? There's fire code requirements, right? Because, in case there's a fire in either dwelling unit, the other occupants have to go through that exit to get out. So, it's got to be fire rated properly, in most cases it's 45 minutes.
So you're talking about drywall and doors and all that?
Yeah. So the doors that lead into that stairwell or that exit and the drywall all has to meet the fire code requirements. So in most cases it's, a 45-minute fire separation, which is, 5/8 drywall or double 5/8. And a 20-minute closure on like a fire door that meets the 20-minute fire rating with self-closing devices. So that's, if we're going into a conversion project where it's a single-family home, we have 2 dwelling units, they're both coming through a shared entryway, we have to fire rate that space.
Right, and each unit has to be a minimum of 700 square feet.
That's city by city specific.
In Hamilton, sorry.
Yeah. So that's that goes to zoning bylaw. Some like in Hamilton, it's minimum 700. In other cities, there's a maximum.
Yeah, like St. Catharines.
St. Catharines has I think it's 640 or something.
Yeah, something like that.
Is the max, right? So there's in other cities, it's smaller. It's like minimum 35 meters squared, so whatever that is in square feet, which is quite small. So yeah, that's city by city. That's also an important factor when you're looking at the zoning. What's the zoning requirements for a dwelling unit? And you have these minimum and maximum sizes, right? So, like for instance, I was helping a client here in Hamilton. 2-story and an attic, so like 3 levels. But the actual building itself was only 600 square feet. So even like if we make the whole main floor a unit, it doesn't meet the minimum unit size, right? So in this case, we're taking the main floor and the basement as one unit.
But the ceiling heights were good in the basement?
Well, this is where there's some challenges around ceiling height down there, which is a building code thing, right? So ceiling heights is a building code thing. It's not a zoning bylaw thing.
Okay.
So you can't get a minor variance for ceiling height. Okay. If you can't meet minimum building code, you can't get a permit, right?
Yeah.
Now, some cities are starting to follow the national building code in regards to some of these requirements in order to help get more legal, affordable units into the marketplace. So, sorry. So for Hamilton, for instance, I don't want to put any false information out there, but they are starting to accept some lower ceiling heights than minimum building code on a case-by-case basis based on other factors like fire separation and interconnected smoke detectors. But when you're going to the planning department, the plan examiners still have to follow the building code, right? So on a new application, on a new dwelling unit, chances are you can't get those reductions. If it's an existing space that you're trying to legalize,
right,
they're a bit more willing to work with you, and they'll accept some lower heights because it's an existing space that they're trying to help get legalized and safe in the city.
Okay,
that's Hamilton. Okay, other cities don't have those types of agreements within their building departments that they're going to follow the national building code versus the Ontario building code. There is talk, I think Doug Ford was talking about, or the government was talking about, maybe starting to get away from the Ontario building code and start to follow the national building code in an effort to ease the red tape in the bureaucracy around development. Because, as we all know, that's one of the biggest challenges in getting new affordable dwelling units into the marketplace is the red tape, right? The bureaucracy surrounding development. And I see it on a little part, as far as just trying to get some legal second units in, and some of the challenges that we face with that, right? So I can imagine on a larger scale with some of these larger developers, like, it takes years and years and years to get any sort of development through, right? And it's all because of just all the processes that we have to go through working with planning departments and building departments and zoning bylaws and all this kind of stuff. It, just takes time, right?
Although you did say half an hour ago that it's easy.
Well, if you know the zoning bylaws and the building code, like, it is easy, okay? Doesn't mean can't be frustrating. It can be very frustrating. I still get frustrated sometimes dealing with the city. But it goes back to lack of knowledge. There's still things that I'm learning about the building code, still things I'm learning about zoning bylaw that still catch me by surprise, and it's still, when you're trying to get something through and trying to get a project started and you get these constant delays from the city, it is frustrating. But every project I'm doing, every permit I'm working on, I'm learning, and it is becoming easier, right? So for me now, like, for the most part, dealing with the second unit conversion, it's relatively straightforward. for the first time investor who's maybe doing it for the first time, maybe doing it on their own, it can be frustrating. Like, be prepared to be frustrated and angry. And I actually met with, I was talking with an investor at a recent networking group, first-time investor, first-time conversion project, doing it on his own as far as the permit process. And he was like almost red in the face with anger, talking to me about his frustration with the city. And I'm like, I've been in your shoes, man. Like, I know exactly what you're feeling and the anger that you feel. And you just have to take it as a learning experience. And you have to learn from this, because if you're going to be an active investor and doing like a lot of renovations and buying rental properties and doing these types of things, you have to learn the process. You have to be able to learn the language of the building department and of the planning department, so that you can keep your life sane, you know? And that just comes with doing more projects, right? Yeah, for sure. Just comes with time, you know? But yeah, like this is why these big developers have lawyers, because, you know, it's on a larger scale, those problems are much greater, right? Of
course. Yeah.
So.
Cool. Well, you're obviously very knowledgeable. I'm sure a lot of people will benefit from working with you. I'm going to jump into the next section here, which is the random 5. I'm going to ask you 5 random questions, and you can just tell me what first comes to mind when you hear it.
All right.
All right. What would you like your children to do for a living?
Well, I've always told my wife, like, we're raising a little property manager, you know. The reality is, you know, he may not enjoy what we're doing, you know, and it probably won't become real for him as it did for me until he starts buying his own property, until I encourage him, hopefully, to buy his own investment property, his own bungalow, live on the main floor, rent out the basement. Maybe someday he'll appreciate what it can do. But again, like my wife and I like, our son's only 3 years old, so we're still a long ways off. But I'd still encourage him to go to school. Like, whatever you want to study it. You know, whether or not it's going to be benefit your life or not. Like, the life experience is going to be crucial. And just got to find something that you enjoy, right? Because it's all about, like, if you're going to work something every single day, you have to be able to enjoy it. You know, like, nothing is worse than going to a job and you just hate it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Well, that's great advice for your son. Would you prefer pancakes or waffles?
Waffles.
Waffles over pancakes. Why do you say that?
You know what? I just find pancakes too mushy. Like, and unless you get them like fresh and hot off the griddle, and they're a little bit crunchy, like, oftentimes by the time I get them, they've been already sitting for 5 minutes, and they go cold, and they're mushy, and they get soaked with syrup, and at least a waffle holds its, like, integrity a bit
That's
better.
A good point. All right. What's the greatest book you've ever read?
The greatest book I've ever read, well, I know I would say it's the Bible. I would say the Bible is probably one of the greatest books I've ever read. Other than that, I don't really read a lot of books. I'm more of a listener.
Have you read the entire Bible?
No, I have not. I should, but I haven't. No.
All right.
No. I've never really been into. I'm a bit ADD, so I can't sit down for a long time and focus and read a book. I'd much rather listen or watch. Like, listen to a podcast, an audiobook, or watch a video.
Well, how'd you get your college degree then? Didn't you have to sit
I
down
don't
and
know.
read?
I have no idea. I did manage to pass. I actually passed with decent grades. You know, I'm like a B+ student.
So then you are probably good at sitting down and focusing and reading.
I can, yes. When I have to, like, I can crunch and I can focus in and read whatever I need to do. Retain that knowledge, you know, for as long as I need it for.
Right, and you're working on your second suite conversions and reading all of these building codes and all. So for sure, you're capable of doing it.
Oh yeah, you know what? And it's funny. Sometimes I catch myself in the evening reading the building code. You know, and you know, some people might watch Netflix. I'm on the couch, you know, on my phone, you know, reading through the building code. I have the physical building code binders as well that I flip through, and I do find it interesting. Like, if you're into that type of stuff, but I'm having an easier time understanding the building code and the language that it's written in.
Mm-hmm.
At first, when I read through, I'm like, what the heck does this mean? Now I have a better understanding of it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
Cool. All right. What's your favorite documentary?
My favorite documentary? No, I love documentaries. Like, I watch a ton of documentaries. Like, if I'm going to watch anything on Netflix, it's the documentary section,
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't have a favorite. Like, I watch them all. Like, I love history. I love like the planet Earth stuff.
Yeah.
Animals. I love like ancient history stuff. I'll watch like the ancient aliens and the universe type stuff. I love watching TED Talks and stuff
Seems
like
like
that.
you really maximize your days with the farm, the animals, the building code reading, documentaries, all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, I know. I have a lot of various interests. I think like most people, like, just because, I'm doing second suite conversions and building code doesn't mean that's the only aspect of my life.
Mm.
Like, you have to keep a balanced life, right? So, we have the farm. I work in real estate during the day. Our family has boats, so we like to spend time boating on the water. We have a boat in Hamilton Harbor West Marina, so I like going down there. Our family enjoys camping, so we go camping once in a while. We go to church and enjoy time with our family and stuff like that. So, just trying to keep a balanced life, right? No different than everybody else out there.
Yeah, of course. Well, that's good. Good for you for doing all the things that you love to do and living a good life. Would you spend $5,000 to spruce up curb appeal, or would you spend that money on renovating a bathroom?
You know what? So I come from a landscaping background. So I spent a lot of years in the landscape industry, and I can't have one of my properties that looks crappy from the outside. It just goes against my core.
Yeah.
So not that I would spend money on like big fancy gardens that are like a lot of work to maintain on a rental property, but I would spruce up the front porch. Maybe build a new deck or something. Resod the lawn. Prune all the shrubs and bushes. Make sure it's a nice, neat looking, clean property from the outside. But I always start on the inside and then work my way out.
Okay. So out of the two, you would start with the bathroom?
I would start with the bathroom.
And then focus on, but if you only had to do one, if you only had $5,000 and you either spent it on the curb appeal or the bathroom?
I would say the curb appeal.
Yeah.
That's people's first impression when they walk up to the house. If the house looks like crap from the outside, I don't think tenants will necessarily want to live there either.
I agree with you.
I think they can live with a dated bathroom, but if the house is messy and overgrown and long weeds and the front steps are cracked and don't work, you have to fix that.
That's true. You got to think, what kind of person are you going to attract by having bad curb appeal? Like you said, I think if it's clean and it's in decent shape but outdated, the bathroom, then they'll probably live with that over a house that just looks terrible from the outside.
Yeah, if the windows are all like, if the caulking on the windows is all bad and there's vines growing up the house and the neighbors or your fence is like leaning over 2 feet, like these are things that you have to fix because you're trying to attract a good tenant. Yep. A good tenant's not going to want to live in that place. Yeah. Even if the inside's nice, right? So
cool. All right, so that's it. Before we finish things off, are you interested in sharing how you can help people, what services you provide, and maybe just briefly how people can reach out to you?
Yeah, so basically you can connect with me on Facebook. You just Google my name or look up on Facebook, Ken Bekendam. I'm the only one in existence, so I'm fairly easy to find. You can also go to my website, legalsecondsuites.com. I have put out a checklist for those of you who are trying to figure out, can we legalize this property or not? I get a lot of questions about, can we legalize? So I put together this checklist, legalsecondsuites.com/checklist. You can put in your email address and it gets sent to your inbox that you can download it. It's just an easy guide to kind of walk through some of these building code and zoning issues. Yeah, my company is King Homes Inc., and we basically specialize in legal second suite conversions, and I do a lot of permit work as well as part of that, and also do some JV partnerships too with people who are looking to just kind of hand off all of the work that we do, onto a work partner. So I'm definitely that person that can help out with that as well.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much for your time, Ken. Appreciate it. And best of luck to you, and looking forward to seeing you at another investment event or wherever else.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right.